We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Thursday. It's a big day. It's arraignment day in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump is going to appear in court, as far as I know. They did talk about the possibility of appearing by video, but from what we understand, Donald Trump's people says he will be in court in D.C. today. I believe it's 4 o'clock Eastern time, which is what, about 3 o'clock my time and about 1 o'clock on the Pacific coast. So it's happening today, and it's going to be very interesting because, of course, we've got all the Trump-lefucks talking about civil war. We're going to fight. Donald Trump begging his people to come out and fight to save the country. He did the same thing in the Manhattan district. Nothing happened. He did the same thing in Florida. Nothing happened. And as much as people might be worried about it, I don't think anything's honestly going to happen. People always want to make the comparison to the January 6th situation, and there is no comparison at this point. Donald Trump's not in office. He's not the president. He can offer no protection. He can put up no hurdles for law enforcement to not get to the people who are committing crimes. All the people that committed crimes for Donald Trump, most of the violent ones are in jail currently because of January 6th. The rest are paranoid that it's a trap, that they're going to be put in jail. So, I could be wrong, but I'm willing to bet almost anything that there will be no violence, and it'll be a lot like Manhattan District and Florida. We'll see. We'll see. Either way, we'll let you know what happens. But this is a little different situation than before. They had indictments that were sealed, and then we found out about it after the arraignment. Well, we have already seen this indictment, and it's pretty compelling. I got to tell you, Jack Smith is almost artistic in his indictments. They cover all bases. They pretty much answer all the complaints or the defenses that they could anticipate out of Donald Trump and his people. They're coming out, of course, and saying it's First Amendment. We can say virtually anything. But in Jack Smith's indictment, he points out it's not about the words you say, it's about the actions you took. And Donald Trump's got a lot of problems because he's got a lot of people testifying against him, and they all happen to be his own people. So it's going to be a little hard to deny that. But that's happening today, the arraignment, and we'll be interested to see what actually happens. It will probably be uneventful most of the time. Arraignments, unless something unusual happens, it'll be maybe a half hour. He basically is read his charges. He pleads not guilty. They give a few bits of information and they set up the next hearing, and that's it. Now, something interesting. I wanted to talk about this because I think a lot of people are confused by this. One of the things Donald Trump's lawyers are saying, they're a little upset about Jack Smith wanting a quick quick trial, 90 days. And all of Donald Trump's lawyers are coming on. 90 days? You've been working on this for 3.5 years. You got to give us some time to look through this stuff. Well, Jack set this up so it's going to be pretty simple. We don't have the classified documents and whatever certification that has to go along with that in this case. That saves a lot of time. In this particular indictment, they didn't include anybody else. It's just Donald Trump, and I'm convinced that Jack Smith did that on purpose to streamline it, to get it going as quickly as it possibly could go. But here's the other thing. This comment by the lawyer saying they've been working on it for 3.5 years. No, they haven't. No, they haven't. Jack Smith was hired in November of last year. That's just coming up on 10 months. It's not been 3.5 years, so don't tell me you need this extra time because of all the time it's being investigated. Jack Smith got hired in November of last year. He's been working ever since, and we'll see what happens. Jack Smith has been working pretty quickly. It's not quite been a year yet, and for Donald Trump's lawyers to say, you had all this extra time, we need more time. We're at about 10 months. Let's give them 10 months. 10 months from now, what does that put us at? May or so? That sounds fair. That sounds reasonable. In fact, if they can get it going quicker, that would probably be better. And that's a distinct possibility because Donald Trump doesn't have a friend. That's the judge. We know Aileen Cannon down in Mar-a-Lago is kind of a wild card. We don't know exactly what she's going to do and how long she's going to delay the trial down there. But in D.C., we know that that's a different story. Judge Chutkan, she's been on the bench for 10 years. She was appointed by Barack Obama. She's overseen some cases with the dumb Trump-la-fucks that attacked the Capitol, and she's notable for giving these Trump-la-fucks, these terrorists, these insurrectionists, the most stringent punishments of any judge. You know, she'll get a stretch of sentences she should give, and she'll go beyond that. She ain't fucking around. She's also the one, when they were talking about Donald Trump and what he could and couldn't do, she's the one that said, well, a president isn't the king. Yeah, I think she knows what's up. And as much as Judge Aileen Cannon may be a problem for us, maybe not, but she may be a problem for us. As much as that is the case, Judge Chutkan in Washington, D.C., is going to be no nonsense, all business, and not going to be listening to shit from Donald Trump. I wanted to bring something else up to Florida. It's interesting about Florida. Florida has all kinds of problems, and they're largely due to Ron DeSantis not doing his job or doing a fucked up job. He's got a lot of problems down there. But there's one problem that caught my eye recently, and I find it to be kind of ironic. Have you heard about this situation in Central Florida where they're actually calling it an epidemic of leprosy? Leprosy? Now, in my life, the only time I ever heard of leprosy was when I was in Sunday school or vacation Bible school, and it was something biblical. It sounded fucking horrible. But now we have it in Central Florida. You know, it's funny, if it would have happened in a blue state, all the evangelicals would have said, it's God's will, he's punishing you. Funny, they're not saying it now. But this is literally a disease from biblical times, and it happens to be hitting Central Florida. I mean, it's a tragic thing. It's a scary fucking thing. How does that even happen? How does leprosy spread? How many times have you heard about it in recent years? I don't know. I don't know. But if those evangelicals are concerned about God's wrath, they may want to check into that, because they got a problem. And just by virtue of them having leprosy down there, I'm definitely not going to Florida. And if you live in Florida, don't go to Central Florida. Because that leprosy shit, I don't even know if you can get over it. I know nothing about the disease. I just know it's bad, and I know it was in the Bible. All right. We've got some emails here. The first email comes to us from Jace from Texas, talking about states with problems. We've got a few of those. Jace has been on the show a couple of times. By the way, I want to say thank you to Dennis for coming on yesterday. It was kind of short notice, but I really wanted to have another voice on after the indictments, and he did not disappoint. He was very helpful, has some great insights, and I enjoy having him on the show. Now, before that, we had Tony on. Remember Tony? He was on. And apparently, well, I'd spoken to Fred, too, who has been on before and was going to come on. And apparently, after Tony had been on, Fred had reached out to Tony and said, hey, we should both go on the show with Mike together. Not a bad idea. And I don't have a problem with them doing that. You know, if you want to help me produce this show, fucking cool. And the idea of having Tony and Fred on together, I like that idea. I know Kara talked about having multiple people on the shows in the past, and we've done that. We haven't done it as of late, so I'm open to that prospect if you want to. If we want to get one, if you want to come on and just be a guest and offer your insights, you can do that. But if you want to be on with somebody else, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I think the shows with listeners usually go pretty well because it causes some interaction, obviously, and it just makes it more entertaining. Certainly more entertaining for me. Like I told Dennis, you know, sometimes when I'm doing the show by myself, I bore the shit out of myself. I don't know what it does for you guys, but I get bored with it hearing myself. So having people coming in and being a guest is a great deal. All right. So anyway, let's get to the email from Chase. He says, "Hey, Mike, love the show you had with Dennis talking about the indictments and all that crazy shit going on. Speaking of crazy shit, did you hear about Bill O'Reilly saying Trump will probably sign a plea deal because his lawyers will convince him to? So I'm not sure if he still believes Trump will be the nominee, but Bill also says Biden won't be the Dem nominee and that Michelle Obama would be. As you know, I'm a recovering Republican. I may be off, but Bill used to be right every once in a while, but this is batshit crazy. I believe we will have a 2020 rematch with not only the same results, but more votes for Biden. Michelle, if you read her book, is not a big fan of politics. And honestly, why would she do this? Old Bill says the plea deal would be for minor stuff, which when you read the indictments, nothing minor about them. Republicans always accuse others of lying and scheming. Comer and the rest of the House clowns just figured Biden was as crooked as the GOP. So far, that has turned out wrong, but not for lack of trying by them. So what are your thoughts? Maybe we can discuss this Saturday when I'm on. Looking forward to it, my friend. And of course, Jace is coming on. We'll record late Friday night. He'll be on Saturday. So we have Jace on Saturday. And I think Dennis and Fred will be on Sunday. So I'll be looking forward to that. Well, have you seen Bill O'Reilly on TV lately? You talk about diminished looks, mentality, verbal ability. There's something going on with Bill O'Reilly, and he's certainly not in his old form. I think he's wrong on all accounts. I do. First of all, Donald Trump will not plead out, I don't think. As I understood it, he was looking for a deal on the classified documents case, and Jack Smith said, fuck yourself. I'm not going to cut a deal. And, you know, frankly, why should he? He's got all this evidence. It seems pretty clear what was going on. This is an important case. There has to be a message sent. Somebody has to be accountable. He's got a lot of time in this. This is a historic event. Why would Jack just shut it down and give him some easy deal? That's not going to happen. Bill O'Reilly's probably right that Trump will not be the candidate. I don't believe he will be the candidate. Now, Joe Biden, I do think will be the candidate unless something happens. When I say unless something happens, I mean, you know, if it's an illness or some kind of medical problem. And I'm not saying that Biden is ill or even fragile, but he's going to be 82. And when you're 82 years old, anything can happen. And that's my greatest fear, that we get 2 days before the election and something happens to Joe Biden. Then we have to scramble or put Kamala Harris up, which I'm fine with. But I think if all stays the same, Biden will be the candidate in 2024. I don't think there's any question about it. Whether you think he is the best candidate or best presidential material or not makes no difference. At this stage of the game, he's the incumbent president. He's got a track record. He's the best chance for this party to win in 2024, whether you like him or not. I would prefer somebody younger, but in this situation, he's got to run unless he can't. Now, the idea that Michelle Obama will run for president is fucking ridiculous. It's not going to happen. She doesn't need to do that. She was in the White House for 8 years. She's not Hillary Clinton. I don't think she has any political ambitions. I'm going to tell you right now, Barack Obama's not ready to be first gentleman. After you were president, you're going to take a demotion? No, that ain't going to fucking happen. This is just the crazy bullshit that Republicans spew, and they try to act smart, but none of that is going to happen. If he stays healthy, Biden will be the candidate for the Democratic Party in 2024. Donald Trump will not be the candidate because he'll have too much shit going on. He will not plead out because he's a narcissist, and the last thing he will want to do is admit guilt, even if it's a deal that he can't ignore, because I don't think Jack Smith is going to let him out of this shit. I think Jack Smith realizes that this is important to this country, that all is exposed and people are accountable for the shit they do. So, yeah, that's not going to happen. And Michelle Obama, she doesn't need to run for president. That's fucking crazy. That's stupid. That's not going to happen. There are many other people that would be wonderful candidates. We don't have to go back in time like the Republicans do and grab somebody who's not even a politician and put them up for president. If not Joe Biden, we need somebody with experience, some ability, that knows how to run things in this country and in Congress and get things done. We're not bringing in celebrities anymore or novices. Oh, he can learn on the job. Well, it didn't work for Donald Trump. It would probably be better for Michelle because she's smarter. But still, that's crazy. That's not going to happen. So that's my take, Jace, and we can talk about it on Saturday. All right, the next one comes from Eric. Eric is our listener from Iowa. He says, "Hi, Mike. This probably is going to be a horrible week for Trump. You are right. It has been a horrible week, considering that they already have barricades up in Georgia. He could potentially get indicted as early as Monday. This came like Sunday night, and of course, we had other things going on, and I didn't read it. So, of course, he was indicted. That's not even considering any more possible superseding indictments. And yes, that's something we have to consider. One expert I heard on MSNBC was saying that they have seen an indictment amendment like 7 times with superseding charges. We know there have been superseding charges on the classified documents. We know that with one indictment on the January 6th situation, that's just the start. There's 6 co-conspirators. There's members of Congress. There are going to be a lot of superseding indictments coming out of the January 6th investigation. Eric goes on to say, I wonder if Dirty Diaper Donny will get hit with federal charges in the Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, New Jersey, or other federal districts over any of his schemes. At the rate this is going, he could have 250 charges or more in 6 or more federal districts and several state courts. He says, have you seen the video from here in Iowa recently where Trump came out on stage to Brooks and Dunn's Only in America? If you haven't, they started the song at the point where they're singing, one might end up going to prison. One might be president. Yeah, I saw the video, and that was obviously intentional. And I'm sure they thought they were doing something clever there, but it was pretty embarrassing, actually. Of course, he came out to cheers, though it did sound pretty low energy. Some people are saying that it was an intentional jab at Trump, but I'm guessing it was an oversight as they wanted to be part about being president. And some people are speculating that COVID Kim wants to be Trump's VP. Unfortunately, here in Iowa, she wouldn't have to resign to run. No, I think that was an intentional. Now, when we're talking about Republicans, we're not talking about bright people. the fact that it just happened to be one might go to prison or one might be the president, that's too on the nose to have just been by chance. I'm sure that whoever put this together thought this would be kind of an interesting, dramatic effect and would cause people to get excited. Because, as Donald Trump has said, these indictments are a badge of honor. So the prospect of him going to jail in his mind, and probably the minds of all these other little Trump-la-fucks, is, see, we're proud of it. You can send us to jail, but we're fucking proud of it. Yeah, I saw it. It's a bunch of shit. And Donald Trump better get his rallies in now, because soon he won't have time, money, and there won't be the interest in people that want to watch him talk. Eric goes on to say, with Mitch McConnell glitching the other day, it once again draws focus on how members of both the silent generation and baby boomers refuse to give up the levers of power. These people should retire. Personally, I think Mitch is trying to hold on, not till 2026, but after the 2024 election. Agreed. If I understand it right, the replacement would only serve until the next scheduled federal election. That's true. So if Mitch left office right now, whoever took over for him would be in office till 2026, and then there would be the natural election. With Feinstein, Dianne Feinstein, her term is up in 2024, so she's just got to make it to the 2024 election. Let's see what he's saying. The replacement would only serve until the next scheduled federal election, and there would be either a special election or a normal one, depending on if the term is up for the seat. Yeah, that's correct. Also, he doesn't want to take the chance that the governor appoints a Democrat. That's true, and we've talked about that. By rights, the governor, who is Andy Beshear, who is a Democrat in Kentucky, normally would be able to appoint anybody as a replacement senator. And because he's Democrat, presumably he would appoint a senator, and that just leaves a bad taste in Mitch McConnell's mouth, which I don't understand, because if he's dead, who the fuck cares? But Mitch McConnell will wreak havoc beyond the grave, apparently. But so Mitch McConnell and the legislators in the Republican Party tried to game the situation, and they voted a bill in that instead of Andy Beshear being able to pick whoever he wants, that the Republican legislature would pick three candidates, all of course being Republican, and he'd have to pick amongst those three. Now, what we recently heard was that Andy Beshear says, no, I think that's unconstitutional. I'm going to appoint anybody I want to. And then, of course, there'll be a lawsuit and it'll go through the courts and all that bullshit. But by the time it got done, the term would be up anyway. So fuck him. He's playing Donald Trump's and the Republicans' game, just running the clock. And yeah, I think Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are concerned about a Democratic senator being named. Then he goes on to say, you're right about it also being about power. The longevity gives them, like that fossil Chuck Grassley being president pro tem of the Senate and number 3 in line for the presidency if Republicans are in charge. To paraphrase my former boss, I wouldn't trust these fossils to run a garage sale, let alone our government. Thanks, Eric. Well, and I'd have to agree with you. I mean, when you look at Chuck Grassley, Mitch McConnell, Dianne Feinstein, even Joe Biden to a certain extent, any of these elderly people, they're so out of touch with the times. They're still living in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And the world has changed dramatically. Politics has changed dramatically. You got to keep up with the times. You know, you've got somebody like Biden who's a moderate Democrat, and that's fair enough. You know, you get to do whatever you want to do. But because things have gone so far right, I think we almost have to go progressive left in order to get somewhere back in the middle, you know? what's going to happen is if you're far right now and you pull to the left, you might get halfway to center. But if you go way left and start giving back to the people in this country, maybe we can ultimately get it back to center, which is usually the best place to be, because then you've got Democrats and Republicans working together. And we haven't had that in a long time. And unfortunately, because of that, we get nothing done, nothing at all. Now, before I get into some of these stories, and there's a number of stories clearly, somebody sent this to me. His name is Brett. And apparently he says, saw this ditty in the Washington Post article's comments. Read it, kind of clever. Now, Brett didn't write this, but he found it in the Washington Post. It says, Trump has been indicted. The shit has hit the fan. And we will be delighted when his ass is in the can. He tried to steal the White House. He thought he'd be a king. Instead, he's facing jail time because justice is a thing. Brett, thank you. We ought to put a little country, maybe have Jason Aldean do it. Put a little country music to, maybe call John Colbert. We'll call John Colbert, put a tune to this, and we'll put that shit out. See how they like it. I have a feeling there's going to be some angry fucking Trump-la-fucks over something like that. All right. As I said, Donald Trump is expected to appear in person for his arraignment in D.C. federal court today on charges that he conspired to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and the run-up to the January 6th attack. And as I've said before, this is an historic day and a historic event. Never in the life of this country have we ever seen a former president be charged with criminal federal charges, especially in their attempt to overturn an election and overthrow this country. This is the kind of historical event that we will remember till we die. Our kids will remember because they were young when they saw it. Our grandkids will hear about it. This is a very big turning point in this country. When you're in a position like this, you can either go way left, way right, way south, way north. You don't know. You're kind of at a pivot point here. Personally, I sense the way things are going, the vibes, if you will, that we're going the right direction. And this is going to take the legs out from under the Republican Party, certainly Donald Trump, and we will be headed back to some normality or some decency anyway in our politics. It's going to take some time. You don't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden everything's okay, but at least we're headed in the right direction. Now, Trump was indicted on Tuesday, 4 counts, including conspiracy to defraud the nation. This is Trump's 3rd criminal case. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, of course, was unprecedented. Special counsel Jack Smith said in a statement Tuesday after the charges against the former president were announced. It's interesting watching Jack Smith speak up. He just says what he's going to say, and he walks off the stage. Tons of people want to ask him questions. He doesn't answer anything. And that's the interesting thing about Jack Smith. He obviously runs a very tight ship. He's only going to give out so much information. He's not going to talk much. Did you notice another thing with Jack Smith and his investigations? 0 leaks, no leaks. And that's rare enough when you're talking about Washington, D.C. and politics and the legal system. There's always leaks to some extent. None with Jack Smith. He must run a tight ship. And when you watch what he's doing and you read the indictment, if you haven't read it, you should. It's very well written. It's very specific. It kind of sets traps for Donald Trump, as if Jack Smith knew what he was going to suggest or argue, and he already put things in the indictment that discount those. Like what I was saying before, I noticed his lawyers coming out on television shows yesterday saying, well, it's about the First Amendment. He can say whatever he wants. And in the indictment, Anticipating that, Jack Smith said, well, yeah, you can say whatever you want, but this isn't about what you said. This is about the actions. And that's where the problem's going to be for Donald Trump's attorneys. I heard one even say, yeah, I think we're going to win this. Are you fucking kidding me? Seriously. You'll have multiple charges in this case. You've got 40 in the Mar-a-Lago case. You better fucking win them all or you're done. That's the problem with lawyers in this situation. They got to run the table in order to win, but there's so many charges. It's impossible for them to win every case. It may be impossible to win most of the cases. But as I've said before, when it comes down to it, all that really matters is that Donald Trump get charged and convicted of one case, because that's all that is needed to take his ass down. I went on to say, as described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Everything about January 6th in Jack Smith's mind was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. What I like about Jack Smith is he doesn't mince words. He just says it straight. He says it simply, and it's hard to defend against that. In fact, I've listened to some of the pundits and some of the legal authorities that have been on television shows, and not one of them can come up with one idea that would be a good defense. And all of them have said the idea of using the First Amendment is absolutely ridiculous. It's not even really a defense. And that tells you one thing. That's all they fucking got. That's all they got. So it doesn't look good for Donald Trump. If he wants to cut a deal, which I don't think he'd ever do, but if he does, I don't know that Jack Smith is going to allow that. I think there's some importance to these charges to be seen through. Go to court, get convictions. It's important to the country that we know what happened and that we can see the accountability. The last thing Jack Smith should do is make it look like that Donald Trump got off easy. Nobody wins in that situation. Certainly not Jack Smith. Certainly not the United States. Certainly not the Democrats. So I'd be surprised if there's any deal cut in spite of what Bill O'Reilly says. Fuck Bill O'Reilly. What's he doing right now? He ended up having to leave because he's a sexual abuser. So I don't take into account anything he says. He's a loser. He's a criminal. Fuck him. Fuck him. He's wrong about everything he says. He's just spewing the Republican rhetoric in hopes that somebody will fucking believe it. All right, we are going to take a quick break and we will be right back. Now, one of the defenses that Donald Trump will try, and it's not going to work, but he's going to try nonetheless because he frankly doesn't have much to try. He's going to try to say that, I really believe that there was election fraud. You can't get me on intent because I believe there was election fraud. And I even saw one of his former lawyers on TV and said, yeah, it's going to be his word against everybody else's. Well, here's the problem. Everybody, with the exception of a few dumb fucks, told him that he lost. Donald Trump was advised by his advisors that he lost, so he knew. It didn't matter to Donald Trump. What he thought he would do is try to gaslight people and cause some confusion and try to get it back somehow, some way. Donald Trump was repeatedly told by top Republican officials and allies, including people he often relied on for candid advice, that his claims of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election were bogus. He simply chose to disregard the truth, according to Tuesday's federal indictment. That's what it said in the indictment. And Jack Smith wouldn't say that unless he had absolute proof. The latest indictment, Trump's third to date, it lays out numerous instances when GOP allies at the highest levels of federal and state government called him out for spreading lies. They range from Vice President Mike Pence to Arizona Republican Speaker of the House Russell Byers to Trump's own 2020 campaign manager Bill Stepien. Now, if you've got your advisors who are there to advise you and they tell you something, and then you still say, well, no, I thought there really was election fraud, nobody's buying that shit. Now, here's a look at some of the Republicans cited in the indictments as people who told Trump either publicly or privately that he was peddling misinformation. Let's take former President Mike Pence. Now, Mike Pence personally stood to gain by remaining in office as part of the defendant's ticket, and whom the defendant asked to study fraud allegations, told the defendant that he had seen no evidence of outcome determinative fraud. Mike said, yeah, it's not going to work, Donnie. Former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, he's basically Trump's principal advisor on intelligence matters related to national security, disabused the defendant of the notion that the intelligence community's findings regarding foreign interference would change the outcome of the election. And frankly, the only foreign interference there might have been is Russia, and they would have been helping Donald Trump. Didn't work at all. Now, former director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Chris Krebs, and actually, he got his job because Donald Trump created that job for him. And it was intended to protect the nation's cybersecurity infrastructure from attacks, something that's needed. Joined an official multi-agency statement that there was no evidence of any voting systems that had been compromised. This is the guy ahead of cybersecurity, and that declared the 2020 election the most secure in American history. This is his own guy. Days later, after the CISA director, whom the defendant had appointed, announced publicly that election security experts were in agreement that claims of computer-based election fraud were unsubstantiated. And of course, Donald Trump fired his ass. This is always the weird thing regarding the voting machines. They're always talking about how they were hacked and people got into them. These things weren't necessarily hooked to the internet. You know, they did the counts on the boxes themselves, and those counts were put together, I think, by humans. So the whole concept was way off fucking base in the first place. And then you've got Donnie's own AG, Attorney General, William Barr. He said that that the various allegations of fraud were unsupported, and he's gone on to say even more direct things about this. We've got Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, where Donald Trump said that there was fraud there and he should have won and did win Georgia, which is not the case. Raffensperger said the defendant insinuated that more than 10,000 dead voters had voted in Georgia. Just 4 days earlier, Georgia's Secretary of State had explained to the defendant that that was false. They checked it out. There may have been 3 or 4 cases, and I think they were cases of Republican voters, but the 10,000 voters was bullshit. And I don't even know why he picked out 10,000, because he needed 11,780. That's how stupid Donald Trump is. And then there was acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. The defendant asserted that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. You remember that story? The defendant's acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general had explained to him that that was false. And this is what they said. Now, keep in mind, this is testimony that Jack Smith took from these people, the people that worked for Donald Trump, the people that supported Donald Trump. And Rosen said this: the defendant asserted that voting machines in various contested states had switched votes from the defendant, Donald Trump, to Joe Biden. The defendant's attorney general, acting attorney general, and acting deputy attorney general all explained to him that this was false, and numerous recounts and audits had confirmed that the voting machines were accurate. Now, these are the people that are telling him this while this is all going on. And then Donald Trump will try to say, yeah, I really thought it was election fraud. I didn't have the intent. He knew very well exactly what was going on, and he had his best people telling him what was going on. He simply chose not to believe it and chose to try to game the system. Remember, didn't he tell Attorney General Rosen, well, even if you don't find fraud, just say there is, and we'll take it from there. I mean, that's Donald Trump's whole strategy, is to cause confusion and chaos, and then offer up some uncertainty, and then hopefully he can game the system by sending it back to the states or whatever the fuck he wants to do. This is what Donald Trump did, and what Donald Trump doesn't understand is that shit's illegal. Jack Smith knows it's illegal, and now he's got the receipts and testimony from his own fucking people. So Donnie thinks she's onto something. His lawyers think they have a shot, but they don't. Now, it's interesting about Mike Pence. Since Mike Pence had to run from Trump-LaFucks on January 6, 2021, because they were going to hang him, he's been pretty quiet or pretty tame about Donald Trump. Well, he stood up yesterday and spoke out a little stronger than we're used to him seeing. Now, former Vice President Mike Pence responded angrily on Wednesday to former President Donald Trump's claim that all he wanted on January 6, 2021 was for Pence to request a delay in the 2020 election certification. Pence said it was completely false, that Trump only asked him to pause the voting and the counting of the votes, as Trump's attorney claimed. This is what Pence said. He said, let's be clear on this point. It wasn't just to ask for a pause, Pence said on Fox News. The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes, which would have resulted in the issue being turned over to the House of Representatives, and literally chaos would have ensued. That's what he said. That's what he did. And that's what Mike Pence is saying, he said. It's kind of interesting. It seems like Mike Pence may have grown a pair, but a little late, Mike. Maybe January 7th, 2021 would have been the day to grow a pair and speak up. You could have saved this country a lot of drama, a lot of trials and tribulations, but you were too scared. You were worried about your prospects to be president of the United States. Well, you should know by now, everybody knows by now, you don't have a fucking prayer, but yet you still run. And now you're talking tough. It's interesting because you're talking tough now, but you haven't for the last 2.5, 3 years. You were afraid to say something. But now that he's got this indictment, now you feel emboldened to speak out against him. That is a sure sign of a fucking coward. And that's what you are, Mike. You're a fucking coward. Now, as Vice President Pence presided over the U.S. Senate on January 6th, as Congress worked through the objections to certify the election per the indictment, The defendant and co-conspirators attempted to enlist the vice president to use his ceremonial role at the January 6th certification proceeding to fraudulently alter election results. That's what the indictment says. Now, when Pence told Trump he wouldn't go along with this scheme, according to the indictment, Trump complained that his vice president was too honest. Our president of the United States admonished the vice president of the United States because the president felt that the vice president was too honest. That right there will tell you that Donald Trump knew he lost. Why would Mike Pence have to be dishonest if everything Donald Trump said were true? Now, Pence is one of several candidates competing with Trump for the Republican nomination 2024. So far, Trump has remained far ahead of everybody. Ron DeSantis is the closest, but he's losing ground every fucking day. Pence has got 3 or 4%. He doesn't have a prayer in hell. Hell, half the Republican Party don't like him, and the other half is indifferent to him. So he has no chance. Now, Pence has stood out for his critical comments about Trump's efforts to steal the 2020 election, reacting to the most recent indictment on Tuesday. Like I said, he feels safe now that Donald Trump has been taken down a notch. A spokesperson for Pence's campaign has received contributions from more than $30,000 or 30,000 donors, with more than 1,000 contributing daily, a pace that would likely qualify Pence for a spot on the GOP debates. But think about that. Former Vice President Donald Trump's secondhand man. We have 7 candidates that have gotten 40,000 donations. I mean, we got fuckers paying people to send them $1 donation, sending them $20. What's the guy's name? Burnham or something like that up in North Dakota. He said, you send me $1, I'll send you a $20 gift card. Yeah, well, how fucking hard is that? Do these people really support you? But you need 40,000 donations in order to qualify for the debate. And think of this. Mike Pence ain't there yet. 7 other people have already qualified, but not Mike Pence. Donald Trump qualified, but he may not come. I know that Fox News is begging him. In fact, after the indictment, we know that Donald Trump had dinner with Fox News executives. Wonder what they were talking about. Probably talking about the debate. Probably talking about how they're going to play this one out, how they're going to lie about it, how they're going to spin it. All right, new clues have emerged that likely indicate the identity of the mystery co-conspirator 6 in the indictment. Everybody's pretty much figured out that Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, a guy named Cheesebro, and a few other people have been identified by the way they've been explained. Now, in particular, a December 2020 email from Trump advisor to Boris Epstein to Rudy Giuliani is an indication Epstein is the co-conspirator whose identity was outstanding. Theoretically, that's who it probably is. Now, Epstein declined to clarify whether he is a co-conspirator or co-conspirator 6, referring to questions to Trump spokesman Stephen Chun, who did not respond to an email for the story. So, previous reporting from multiple outlets, including Raw Stories, identify Giuliani as co-conspirator 1, John Eastman as co-conspirator 2, Sidney Powell as co-conspirator 3, former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, who we talked about earlier, number 4, Trump lawyer Kenneth Cheesebro, co-conspirator number 5. we've had in question who number 6 is. And a lot of people are hoping for any number of people, from anybody from Ginny Thomas to Epstein to whoever the fuck. Now, Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan, and Luke Broadwater wrote for the Times. The email sent on December 7th, 2020, and reviewed by the New York Times was from Epstein to Giuliani and Mr. Giuliani's son, Andrew, and had the subject line, Attorneys for Electors Memo. It says, Dear Mayor, as discussed below, are attorneys I would recommend for the memo of choosing electors. And it goes on to identify lawyers in 7 states. Now, the report notes that the email matches a description in the indictment of an interaction between co-conspirator 6 and Giuliani, whose lawyer has confirmed he's co-conspirator 1. So it makes sense that Epstein is number 6. However, there's some people thinking of some other things. Now, paragraph 57 of the indictment indicates that Giuliani spoke with co-conspirator 6 regarding attorneys who could assist in the fraudulent elector effort in the target states, and received an email from co-conspirator 6 identifying attorneys in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Now, it was reported there's also strong evidence that co-conspirator 6 is Mike Roman, a former Koch network opposition researcher who served as director of Election Day operations and was placed in charge of executing the fake elector scheme. Now, I've heard people say it's definitely Mike Roman, and I've heard people say it's definitely Epstein. We don't know which one it is. At least at the time I'm recording this, I don't know. We will find out. It almost doesn't really matter. Both of them are going to be taken to task at one point. If they're not one of the co-conspirators, they're going to end up in future indictments. So we'll see what happens. But they aren't indicted as yet. They're unindicted co-conspirators at this point. That doesn't mean they're off the hook. That doesn't mean that they're going to get away with it. That just means on this particular indictment, it's just Donald Trump. And as I've said before, I think Jack Smith did it for a very specific reason. They wanted to streamline this particular indictment to include only Donald Trump so they can get it moving quickly, so they can get it done before the 2024 election. Now, there's something else going on in the classified documents case, and this has always been kind of sketchy. Justice Department is looking into the possibility of disqualification of the attorney representing Walt Nada. He's one of former President Trump's alleged co-conspirators in Mar-a-Lago case, warning the lawyer may have conflicts of interest after representing numerous witnesses in the probe. Stanley Woodward has represented at least 7 other individuals who have been questioned in connection with the investigation, including those who have testified about Nada. The DOJ disclosed that on Wednesday, and the thing is, Nada was having a hell of a time getting any kind of representation. If they disqualify this guy, that's going to pose a problem. It actually could delay it further. So I don't know how badly they want to kick this guy out. He doesn't sound like he's a great lawyer. If he took Nada on as a client, he's got to know he's going to fucking lose. I don't know why you would take that on unless you got money up front, and I would assume he did. Now, the DOJ is requesting a so-called Garcia hearing with Woodward's clients to inform them of the potential risk and inquire into possible waivers, noting that the court could provide an additional independent counsel to Nada to assess whether he is being fairly represented. Now, Donald Trump is paying for the attorney. He doesn't give a shit if he's fairly represented. All he cares about is whether or not this guy keeps his mouth shut about Donald Trump. That's the whole purpose for hiring Nada's lawyer. And Nada should be thoroughly advised of the potential conflicts and attendant risks. Witness 1 and witness 2 should also be present at the hearing and be apprised of the risk that Mr. Woodward may use or disclose confidences he obtained from them. So people having problems with that shit, and it'll be interesting to see if they disqualify him. If they do, it will be more difficult for Nauta and Donald Trump to get him more representation, but it could also cause further delays. Now, with regards to the classified documents case, I don't want you to worry about the delays. Doesn't really matter because January 6th will probably take off before the classified documents. Georgia will take off before the classified documents. And as I've said, all we need is one conviction. I don't care where it comes from, just so we get it and shut this motherfucking Donald Trump down. Now, if Nauta indicates he wishes to waive any conflicts, the court should conduct an inquiry to determine whether the waiver is knowing and voluntary, and the court should then determine whether to accept Nauta's waiver. The motion comes following reports about the extent of Trump's financing of attorneys for allies now embroiled in legal trouble due to their connection with him, as well as Yuscil Tavares to switch attorneys, abandoning representation by Woodward. Now, Tavares is the guy that's the IT expert that couldn't figure out how to delete the hard drive. Yeah. That should go in his next review. If you can't delete a hard drive, maybe you shouldn't be working for Donald Trump, because there'll probably be quite a few opportunities or times when you need to fucking do something like that. All right. Marjorie Taylor Greene is asking the Republican base to keep the faith following Donald Trump's third criminal indictment. It's amazing to me that anybody has any kind of faith in Donald Trump, whether he has the indictments or not. He's not a loyal man. He's not an honest man. He's criminal. He's corrupt. He's a piece of shit. But still, there is a fair faction of people that trust Donald Trump. That is a fool's errand. And I think everybody knows it, but not everybody is willing to abide by it. Now, Greene told conservatives to ignore the news and trust in God's plan, while appearing on the far-right cable network Real America's Voice to talk about the former president's latest legal challenges. Goes back to what I've said before. Don't believe what you see. Don't believe what you hear. Just listen to what I'm telling you. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's trying to play that game. She knows as well as anybody that if Donald Trump goes down, she's pretty much worthless, as is her BFF, Kevin McCarthy. And who knows, Marjorie Taylor Greene may be caught up in this January 6th future indictments. She may already know about it, and she's trying to do whatever she can to discredit Jack Smith. She's made some posts suggesting or questioning Jack Smith's credibility. Goes on to say it is worrisome about what's going to happen in our future, but I always have hope, Greene said during an interview. It's important that we put full faith and hope in God and not anything that we see in the headlines. What makes you think God isn't behind what's in the headlines? See, that's the thing. It's not enough to just say, believe my lies. They have to tell us that God wants you to believe our lies. She goes on to say, our real hope needs to be in God, and Jesus Christ is my Savior. Really, bitch? You don't act like it. And I know He is yours as well, and God has plans much bigger than this. This tells me she's in desperation mode. She can't come with an argument. She can't say anything. Just believe in God. It'll be okay. Now, I don't know who her God is, but I know my God would not support somebody as despicable as Donald Trump. I think my God would make sure that he is accountable for those things that he's done. But this is Marjorie Taylor Greene's effort to divert, distract, and delay, as they always do. Now, earlier in the interview, Greene talked about her plan to defund Jack Smith's special counsel. Oh, yeah, she's got all kinds of big ideas. We're going to impeach Joe Biden. Didn't work. Nothing that Marjorie Taylor Greene has said or suggested has ever worked. Now, she goes on to say Smith has been at the helm two separate investigations of Trump by the U.S. Department of Justice, investigations which Republicans claim are politically motivated. They're not politically motivated. He's independent. He doesn't work for Joe Biden. He was hired by Merrick Garland and given the free rein to do whatever the fuck he needs. It's ridiculous she would even make that statement. Now, of course, Trump was indicted on 37 charges in a case accusing him of mishandling government documents. Last week, Smith filed the superseding indictment, which just added more. Well, I won't even say the cherry on the top, because I think there's more coming in the classified document, just as well as there are more coming, more superseding indictments coming in the January 6th situation as well. Now, Greene aimed her anger at the FBI. Oh, she's mad, telling them that she refused to fund a weaponized government. And again, we've talked about this before. If anybody weaponized the FBI, the DOJ, the IRS, it was Donald Trump. She says, I will not vote to fund the FBI's new headquarters, she declared. I refuse to do that. I will not vote to fund a weaponized government in any form in the FBI and the Department of Justice. Like you fucking matter, you piece of shit. It's going to pass, and whether you vote for it or not is not going to make a difference. She says that's the only power that we as Republicans have right now to make a difference. Greene went on and said, I got to tell you, we don't have a lot of people with us. Greene announced her plan to defund Smith's office in a June tweet where she said, I hope every one of my Republican colleagues will join me. Only Gates and Representative Andy Biggs appear to have publicly co-signed her efforts thus far. Yeah, she might get 3 or 4 or 5 or even 10 votes, but remember, you need 218 votes to pass a bill in the House. No way it's going to pass. She's just spewing this stuff to try to make herself look good, to try to control the narrative, if you will. And I'm telling you this, Margie, it's not going to work. It's just not going to fucking work. You're a loser. You're a constant loser. Nothing you've ever offered or suggested has come to fruition. So I wouldn't worry too much about Marjorie Taylor Greene. She'll keep her lips flapping, and I hope after the 2024 election, she's no longer here, because she's up for re-election as well. Now, the fact that she was voted in the last election is a little disconcerting. It makes you question the people of her district, but let's hope people are getting tired of the bullshit that she throws around. Let's talk about Ron DeSantis, Florida governor. 2 weeks into the reboot of his 10-week-old presidential campaign, pledged to New Hampshire voters this week, he will root out the deep state, he says, from the federal government and start slitting throats on day one. Oh, there you go, Mr. Tough Guy. I'm going to ferret out the deep state and start slitting throats. I've asked a number of Trumplifucks, who is the deep state? Give me one name of somebody who's in the deep state. They don't have an answer for that. They've created a boogeyman that doesn't exist and tied them to the Democrats in hopes that they can gaslight enough people to believe it's true. Now, DeSantis just wrapped up a 3-day trip to New Hampshire, his first since downsizing his campaign due to financial problems. You see, what's happening here, the whole reboot idea, is because what he'd been doing before was failing miserably. So instead of saying, maybe this isn't going to work for me, maybe I'll back out of this, He cuts a bunch of staffs, tries to save some money, and he just starts talking tougher. I'm going to start slitting throats. Ronnie, you're socially awkward. Nobody buys anything you're fucking saying. You should just shut up and go away because you're going to ultimately go away anyway. Now, DeSantis appeared bent on demonstrating that no candidate talks tougher than he does. He promised that under his presidency, Mexican drug cartels would be shot stone cold dead, and vowed that when it comes to federal bureaucrats, we're going to start slitting throats on day one. Yeah, that's what somebody wants to hear about a future president, talking about violence and shooting people to death and slitting throats. See what I mean? He's socially awkward. He thinks by acting tough that way, that's going to get him votes. Now, it may get him votes in the primary run, but as soon as he gets to the general election, which he won't, but if he did, he doesn't have a prayer. He would lose just as badly as Donald Trump. Now, of course, he's in second place of the GOP primary, but he's trailing Donald Trump in the polls by as much as 37 points. He went on to say his Secretary of Defense would need to slit some throats as well. Now, during an interview with Real America's Voice, Florida's governor said he wanted a defense secretary with a sharp blade and a killer instinct who isn't wedded to the extant hierarchy. So what he's saying, basically, I want somebody who's violent, who reacts out of emotions, and and do some crazy shit. You really think that's going to work for you, DeSantis? It's not going to work for you. You're a fucking loser. You're down by 37 points. The only thing you can hope for right now is that Donald Trump keels over from some kind of physical problem or he drops out of the race. I think ultimately he will drop out of the race because he will be so buried in legal situations. But I don't think that's going to do Ron DeSantis any good. As I said before, he was asked about Donald Trump and whether he would pardon him, and he said yes, which doesn't seem to make sense in spite of the fact that they're arguing and Donald Trump is doing everything he can to take him down. But again, the mindset for somebody like Ron DeSantis is that I'll say that I will pardon him. And then when he drops out, all his voters will say, hey, Ron DeSantis is a good guy. We should vote for him. That's not the way it's going to go. The voters that follow Donald Trump are so in love with Donald Trump, I would bet they just don't vote. That would be my guess, because nobody would be good enough. Nobody would be as good as Donald Trump. Now, there was a post titled Expletive Mike Pence from Donald Trump. Donald Trump is in a bad way right now. He is scared shitless. He'll come out and try to act like the tough guy, but anybody that knows him or anybody that knew him knows he's in fear mode. Some of Donald Trump's most ardent supporters have issued new calls. Think of this. And think about what we talked about with Mike Pence earlier. But they've issued new calls for violence against Mike Pence on an online forum that has attracted the attention of law enforcement. That comes out of Rolling Stone. A post titled Expletive Mike Pence. I'm assuming it said fuck Mike Pence. That was the top post Wednesday on the Donald, an online forum for what the report describes as the Trumpiest of the Trump faithful. I think I was talking to TJ earlier, who's been on the show. Good guy, good insights. He was saying that he was going on some lives and getting booted out of the lives because he was in the conservative or the Trump-la-fuck lives. I'm going, why the fuck are you doing that? And I understand why he's doing it. He's trying to put some people in their place, but TJ, you can't. These people are oblivious. they're fucking delusional. You can tell them anything you want to tell them. They aren't going to believe you. Don't waste your time going in talking to Trump-la-fucks. It's not worth it. We have to bury them with evidence and do away with their Lord and Savior, and then hope they go back under their rocks as well. So it's a Reddit style forum, which was used by some plotters of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Oh, so there's a brilliant idea. We know what happened to the people that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. So you're going to use the same social media platform when you know the FBI is looking at you. Now, Rolling Stone's Tim Dickinson writes that a top comment on the post calling for divine retribution. It's the whole God complex thing with Donald Trump. He thinks he's God. They think he's God, and they're both delusional. But they're asking for divine retribution against the traitor. And it reads, may God strike him down for his lies and treachery to the American people, while others fantasized about a public execution. Maybe that's why Mike Pence is starting to talk tough now. He was afraid these people were coming after him, and now he sees that they are anyway. So he figures he might as well fight back. One user wrote, I want to watch his toes dangle in the breeze. This is presumably a fucking adult saying this and putting it on a social media platform where you know the FBI is watching and you're going to get a call. Now, extremist Magadonians, as they call themselves, soon became a baroque in their dark fantasies of how Pence might get hanged. What do they think this is some fucking fantasy movie where you can make these kinds of things? Here's one, a kind of a Second Amendment twist. Make it like an adult version of the pool drop kids play at parties, suggested user Bubba. I'll spell it for you. BUBADMT. I don't know even what that fucking means. Except you take the shot at a target from 200 yards away. A bullseye releases the trap door. I am assuming they mean while they're hanging him. It may be tempting to dismiss such comments, but the fact of the matter is, this is how January 6th started out. I don't honestly believe we're going to see any violence. But anytime we see stuff like this, given what has happened back on January 6th, we need to shut this stuff down. We don't need people talking like this. Now, I don't like Mike Pence, but I don't want to see him hung. I don't want to see him tortured. I don't want to see him killed. The fact of the matter is, as much as we're all excited about Donald Trump being taken to task and all the Republicans being held accountable, this is an absolute embarrassment for our country. Everything that happened during Donald Trump's administration and since regarding Donald Trump and the Republicans has been an embarrassment for this country. We should be above this. As much as we're excited about Donald Trump being indicted, we should be ashamed that we allowed it to get to this point. And as long as we allow these people to make these threats and play these stupid games on social media, we're going to continually be embarrassed. And we're also going to put the safety of this country and the safety of our politicians at risk. So it's going to be interesting to see how the FBI reacts to this. Hopefully they will act seriously, decisively, and quickly. We don't need this kind of bullshit going on in this country. Now that Donald Trump is out of office and the Republicans are losing support, we need to stop this shit and try to bring back some respectability to this country. We were long respected, but ever since Donald Trump got into office, internationally, we're not as well respected. We've got to get that back. We're the strongest country in the world. We're the best country in the world. It's time we start fucking acting like it. All right, we're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a good day. We'll see how the arraignment goes, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.